Happy December! It's time to reflect on our past year, look back at our highs, our lows, spend time with loved ones, plot against enemies, and obviously systematically categorize all the media that we consumed this year. I read 34 books in 2025, so let's rank them. This is my first time experimenting, dipping my toe into the tier ranking system, and I thought that for our, S, A, B, C, D tiers, I would kind of do a little nod, homage to a piece of culture from 2025 that I thought embodied the essence of the tier and of the books that I'm going to put in that tier. So let's take a look at our pyramid, shall we?
On the bottom, page.
A hidden tier at the bottom of everything else is sickness, because I've been a little sick. My voice is a little husky, raspy. I am filled with mucus and phlegm. Anyway, our bottom tier, tier D, AI slop. Now, these are not books that I think are AI slop, but like AI slop, I wish that they didn't exist, and I think that they actively do harm. At tier C, we have The Wicked Press Tour. Fun at first, but now I'm tired of it and I wish it were over. At tier B, we have Gnarly by Cat's Eye. Is it the best written piece in the world? No. But do I like it? Yes. Now, again, I'm not saying that the writing in all this tier is bad, but I'm just saying, like Gnarly, I might not think it is the highest quality, but I still enjoy it. At tier A, we have The Party for You Bridge. This particular moment of this particular song really did the rounds this year, struck many hearts. There were a lot of edits made to it. I love the song in its entirety. I love Charlie XCX. I love the album that it's off of, as you can see here. And the bridge in particular, she really, So these are books that strike an emotional chord. They stick with me, and I have revisited or will revisit them. Our S tier, I have The Concept Of. Yes, two of the tiers do relate to Wicked, specifically The Wicked Press Tour. Have I seen Wicked or Wicked for Good? No. These are books that I'm like, wow, I really admire the brain that created this, the person that created this, I should say. This has maybe changed me in some way, or it is something I deeply, deeply love. Or both. Along with tier ranking, I'll be breaking down the storytelling and style, my personal highs and lows with each book. I read a pretty wide range of books this year, but you'll notice I tend to gravitate towards maybe darker stories, particularly horror. I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but I'm so excited to talk about Dracula, which is one of my favorite books, and obviously the original vampire story. And on the topic of great stories and of vampires, today's video is brought to you by Love and Deep Space. Love and Deep Space is a 3D dating sim, and its charismatic love interests have captured the hearts of people across the globe. It's a first-person story where you play a deep space hunter in the futuristic city of Lincoln, and you are tasked with exploring unknown civilizations and protecting the future of humanity. All the while, and most importantly, dating 5 hottie men. Obviously, along the story, we will be encountering some interesting characters. Maybe some sparks will fly as your personalized story, unique to you, unfolds. Love and Deep Space are hosting an in-game event surrounding one of their love interests, Silas's memory pair event, where Silverwings Rest launched their new vampire identity, the dark, brooding, sensual vampire count, Silas. Maybe it's a result of growing up through the vampire craze of the 2010s, but I do love a vampire romance. This Love and Deep Space story is a slow burn from reluctant allies to genuine affection. I feel like this is a perfect vibe for the book talk romance girlies, and also that kind of moody ambience really fits now that we're coming into winter. If you're interested in exploring an action-packed romantic adventure with Silas or one of the other romantic interests, Love and Deep Space is available to download on the App Store and on Google Play. The first entry into the D tier, the AI slop tier, is something that I know is going to upset a lot of people, because I already have upset a lot of people with this opinion. A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Now, this book is like the book talk romantasy book, and it is impossible to exist on the internet, especially on a book side of the internet, and not know this book. Sarah J. Maas has a lot of very loyal fans. She's a very successful author. Unfortunately, she's just not a very good one, in my opinion. I knew the moment that I started this book exactly how it was going to end. And not just because it is like a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, but because this book is so flat, one-dimensional, boring, and predictable. And it's full of tropes, but it doesn't use any of them well. And it does nothing new or fresh or exciting with them. I hated this book. I hated all of the characters. I thought they were all so one-dimensional. I hated the protagonist. But the most unforgivable aspect of this book was its lazy world building. I went on a full rant about this on my book talk video, so I shan't say too much. Passing off a map of the UK and Ireland as a fantasy world and calling the Irish Isle Highburn. There's so much about Ireland and Irish representation in this that it offends not only me but my ancestors. Is Fulham Is Fulham on Lower? Is Fulham Sarah J. Maas? And if you want to know my full opinions about it, again, you can check out my full breakdown. I swear this is not going to be the case for all the books, but for the majority of the bad books, there are books that I read like for a video or something. So I did include this in my worst books of book talk video. So there's a full breakdown there. But Atomic Habits by James Clear. You've probably heard of Atomic Habits as a really viral self-help book. It proposes that you can leverage your habits into systems in order for you to achieve your goals. For anyone considering reading Atomic Habits, I would implore you to save your time, your money, and your energy. Go read a blog post summary or watch a YouTube video, because that will contain all of the useful information in this book. It is the most bloated, waffly it could possibly be. And look, if you are someone that did get value from this book, I'm so happy for you. I think it's atrocious. And something that I think just really sums up the quality of this book is that about a dozen or more of the sources are like Reddit and Twitter posts. For the worst books of book talk video this year, I also read The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. The Midnight Library is about a woman who takes her own life, and then she goes to this mystical library where she can read a book corresponding with like an alternate timeline to see how her other lives would have played out. What would have happened if she got married to her boyfriend? What would have happened if she moved to Iceland? It is the most half-baked, like, no, don't kill yourself, like, it gets better, you have so much to live for, that kind of narrative. And I would say with that tone, it is so surface level. It was written poorly, it was so repetitive, and I feel like Matt Haig has a very superficial understanding of depression, if he has an understanding at all. And again, if this were of some comfort to you, I'm so happy for you. I just did not find any value in this book. Great message, horrible execution. The next two I'm going to lump together, and they're Insurgent and Allegiant. I did a video earlier this year on the Divergent trilogy, on the books and also the films. The first book was fine, the second book was bad, and the third was abysmal. If you have a vague memory of Divergent from your youth, I want to be the one to remind you that Allegiant revolves around a eugenics plot. As the series went on, it became clear that Veronica Roth did not plan the story trajectory at all. The characterization didn't make sense, the story didn't make sense, and it was just full of regurgitated YA dystopia tropes. And the series engaged with the themes of dystopia, social commentary, with the depth of a kiddie pool. With that, we move on to our C tier, the Wicked Press Tour. On the back of our last entry, we have Divergent. Divergent was still bad, don't get it twisted, but I did have a little bit of fun revisiting the first book. I think Veronica Roth wrote it in like 3 weeks in college, which is very clear from the quality. It was still a fun, like, paint by numbers dystopia. I wasn't dreading going back to it like I was with Insurgent and Allegiant, because when I was reading Allegiant, I literally had headaches, like, and I was getting so angry at the quality of writing and the story. It was painful. If you are craving a dystopia, please do not go back to Divergent. Go to The Hunger Games. The Hunger Games truly, they stand the test of time, and I've reread them like 3 times as an adult, and I love it every time. Next, we have The List of Suspicious Things by Jenny Godfrey. This was a thriller that I read early this year. It's set in Yorkshire in the 70s, during the height of the Yorkshire Ripper, who was a serial killer, and it's mainly from the perspective of a young girl who decides that she's going to investigate the case and catch the Ripper. But the narrative bounces between perspectives from characters around her small town, And the narrative was very dramatic. It felt like a soap opera. And even though we did get different character perspectives, they all felt very one-dimensional and flat. Like, it tried to shoehorn in kind of a like, is it racism bad? Wow, look at this racist character. Aren't they bad? Tone when it came to racism in the community. And then it had like a random domestic violence storyline in it. But all of these serious issues were not treated with the gravity that they deserve. It was very much just like these kind of plot points, very one-dimensional. I also just hated the ending of this book. Next on the C tier is another thriller / satire, and it is Yellowface by Rebecca F. Kuang. Now, I have also read Babel by R.F. Kuang, and I loved Babel. Babel is a story of colonialism, language, cultural identity, and academia, and like how they all are interlinked. And while Yellowface has themes of race, racism, cultural appropriation, etc., it felt very shallow. This was actually a reread for me. I read it back in 2023 when it first came out, and I really liked it then. I kind of flew through it. This time I noticed the quality of writing a lot more, and I felt it was very kind of didactic and on the nose in its satire. Yellowface is about a white author who steals the manuscript of her late Asian friend and passes it off as her own, and she pretends to be Asian. She feels like in the era of diversity and inclusion, as a white woman, she is underprivileged, and the satire lies in the main character's attitudes towards race in publishing, and obviously in her pretending to be Asian. And there were a lot of instances of the main character being racist that felt kind of gratuitous. Like, we already know she's racist, we don't need another example of it. It felt like Kwong was like underestimating the reader's intelligence and spelling out the point of the satire for them and not trusting you to make your own conclusions. The last book in our C tier, the last of the meh books, is the first book in the Secret Circle series, The Initiation by L.J. Smith. I read this for my Secret Circle video so that I could compare the book to the TV show. It's about a high school coven of witches. It's very tropey, written for teenagers, but it was fine. I kind of flew through it. It was very, very short. Not that much happened. Either not that much happened or I cannot remember anything that happened in it. Now we have the B tier books, aka Gnarly by Cat's Eye. First up, we have Die Hot with a Vengeance by Sable Young. The full title is Die Hot with a Vengeance, Essays on Vanity, but the book is more so about beauty culture because the author, Sable Young, is a journalist and she was formerly the editor of Allure. I read this while researching for my beauty standards video, and I thought it was fine. It wasn't exactly what I was looking for at the time. I was looking for more of an academic exploration of the beauty industry, and this is very much anecdotal. It's very much from Young's point of view and her experience as a beauty editor and how her relationship with the beauty industry has informed her relationship with herself and her appearance. The collection feels like a friend talking to you, kind of gossiping and spilling their secrets, and I did enjoy it, but it just wasn't really what I was looking for. Next, we have another nonfiction, which is a sharp turn away from Die Hot with a Vengeance, and it is called Nuclear War, a Scenario by Annie Jacobson. Now, I read this book because, like a lot of people, the thought of nuclear war terrifies me to my core, and anytime I think about it, I get just like existential dread, and I'm like, what is actually the point in living? The book was very well researched, and it takes this hypothetical scenario of what if North Korea just launched a nuke on the US without any warning, and like playing through the most likely scenario and event of a nuclear war outbreak. And by the end of it, I was like, okay, pretty much if nuclear war breaks out, we're all dead. As terrifying as that sounds, something about it gave me great comfort because I was like, oh, well, obviously I have no like actual control over this thing, and if it does happen, well, we're gonna die, so no point stressing about it. It goes into a lot of different areas. It goes into kind of nuclear history, it goes into politics, it goes into science, and some of them I just found more interesting than others, which is no fault on the author. Some parts I liked, some parts I didn't, and that's okay. Next up is The Bee Sting by Paul Murray. This is a whopper of a book. It is by an Irish author. It is about an Irish family called the Byrne family, and it follows each family member in different sections. And I think my issue with this book was that I loved some of the sections and some of the characters, whereas others I didn't as much. I think for the mom/wife's section, there's like no punctuation, and it's very much modernist prose, and there's a huge tradition of modernism in Irish literature. If you think of James Joyce, if you think of Sally Rooney, they all use modernist techniques, and I really enjoy that. But sometimes when it's a book this long, I get a little tired of it. So like the nuclear war book, there were a lot of parts that I liked, but there were a lot that I was kind of like, okay, I want this to be over. Next is another yellow book. A lot of yellow books in this. Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. This book is set in a Hunger Games Battle Royale kind of dystopia where prisoners in the US are forced to be gladiators and fight each other to the death for the entertainment of the masses. And because of the state of the US justice system, a lot of those prisoners are Black. And our two main characters are two of the top fighters who also happen to be lesbian lovers, Thurwar and Hurricane Stax. And the whole story is a commentary on the prison industrial complex. There's commentary on race, on class, on capitalism, and the author really does a great job of world building and setting up these kind of fake companies that sponsor or monitor or broadcast the gladiator games. And I really enjoyed the story and the commentary for the most part. I think sometimes it got a bit didactic, quite expository. And again, I think it just irks me when I feel like authors aren't trusting you to, put the dots together and they feel the need to spell things out quite explicitly. Gotta Get Through This by Louis Theroux. This is an autobiography by Louis Theroux, particularly about his career as a documentarian. And I read this as research for my Louis Theroux video so that I could get an insight into his philosophy, into his documentary process, his techniques for interviewing. I partly read this, partly listened to it because it's narrated by Louis Theroux, and I really enjoyed it, but I would say I remember very little of it. I do love Louis Theroux's documentaries, and so it was fun kind of hearing more personal stories from him. I found it very entertaining and interesting, but I don't know how impactful I found it, if that makes sense. I don't know how much of it has stayed with me in the way that his documentary films have. Feeding the Monster by Anna Bogatskaya. Why Horror Has a Hold on Us. This is a book all about the horror genre in film, examining common themes, looking at its history, and looking at why audiences love it. This is a well-researched, well-structured, well-written book, don't get me wrong, but I studied English and film in college, and for my bachelor's dissertation, I wrote on women in horror, specifically female cannibals, and I'm really interested in the horror genre anyways, so throughout college, I did a lot of essays on horror. For me, I didn't really learn anything from this book. I think it's great for people who do have an interest in the horror genre, but I think having studied it, it was just quite basic information for me. Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. Listen, I love The Hunger Games. I really do. I love Suzanne Collins. I think she's a fantastic writer. This is a prequel to The Hunger Games following the character Haymitch. You might have been seeing stuff about it because they're coming out with a film soon. This is the second Hunger Games prequel that Suzanne Collins has written. The first one focused on the President Snow, and his life as a teenager in the Capitol and him kind of becoming evil. And I felt like that book, A Ballad of Song-Ridden Snakes, really fleshed out the world of the Hunger Games. It gave me a lot of insight, not only into Snow, but into the politics of the Capitol, class struggle, of resistance and rebellion, and the very Hunger Games themselves. I don't think it's necessary to the Hunger Games, but I feel like it really enhanced my experience and understanding of the series. And I did really enjoy this book, don't get me wrong, but A Ballad of Song-Ridden Snakes followed a Capitol character whose life was outside of the arena, whereas in this, we get the kind of traditional Hunger Games narrative of a teenager getting raped, going to the arena, and fighting people to the death. And I did enjoy it, and I did think it fleshed out the ideas of rebellion and class, etc. to some extent, but not as much as the other prequel. And I think because it is similar narrative format to the first two Hunger Games books, it didn't feel as fresh or exciting to me. The Rachel Incident by Caroline O'Donoghue. This is another Irish story by an Irish author, and this one is set in Cork City. It's about Rachel, a university student who lives with her best friend James, and then she has an affair with a married professor. I enjoyed this, but I don't remember a lot of it, even though I only read it a few months ago. And I don't know if that has to do with the book or with whatever state I was in when I read it. I really enjoyed the friendship dynamic and the themes of, being lost in your 20s, not knowing what to do after college. And I do always love an Irish story or a story set in Ireland. And I have a couple of friends who have read this and have loved it. So maybe I really just wasn't in the right headspace when I was reading this. I liked it, didn't love. Our last B tier book is A Ghost in the Throat by Doireann Ní Ghríofa. This is another Irish story by an Irish author. This is a work of autofiction, and it is about a young mother who becomes obsessed with a poet from the 1700s, Eileen Dove, and she tries to find out anything and everything she can. And though Eileen Dove's poetry has survived, a lot of facts about her life have not. For a lot of history, women's lives were not thought to be important or valuable, so they weren't really documented. There's a lot of commentary in this book on women, on women's history, on motherhood, on art. And I started off really, really enjoying this, and I thought it was really profound. I was really enjoying the writing. Ní Ghríofa is also a poet who writes in Irish and in English, and her prose is very, for lack of a better word, poetic. It's very flowery, very ornate. And again, I was really enjoying this at the start, but then I put it down and came back to it after like a week or two, and I think I was getting a little bit tired of how decorative the language was. I think for me the book was just a little bit too long, or maybe a lot too long. I also felt like the feminist themes that she explored were quite interesting and profound initially, but just got dragged out too long. By the end, there was just so much repetition, and it felt very didactic, and it felt like Ní Ghríofa was really like kind of beating me over the head with the purpose of the novel. But because the 1700s poet Eileen Dove wrote in Irish, and Ní Ghríofa is an Irish and English speaker, there's a lot about Irish language and translation and what is lost in translation. I did love that. I love language, I love Irish. I just wish this book weren't so long. Same outfit, different day. I had to stop recording and take a break because my voice was starting to go, and now it is 2 days later. So I thought that I'd finished up with the B tier books, but then I was looking and I was like, I think I'm gonna bump one of my A's down to B, and that book is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. I've read all of Sally Rooney's books. This is her newest. There are a lot of aspects that I do really enjoy about it. I do like her writing style. I like how she's able to portray the interiority of characters. I love the Irishness that runs through all of her work and the modernist style. This book follows two brothers, Peter and Ivan, in the wake of their father passing. Ivan is the younger brother. He's 22 and he is obsessed with chess. He is very coded as autistic. The older brother, Peter, is a lawyer in Dublin. He's in his 30s, and his storyline kind of tracks his relationship to two women in his life. The novel switches between the two brothers' perspectives, and I really enjoyed Ivan, mainly because of his kind of autistic representation, and a lot of how his brain worked is how my brain works. I read this book quite early in the year when it came out, and I think now that I've had some time away from it, though I do really admire and appreciate Sally Rooney's writing, I don't know how much of this book has actually stuck with me, how much of an impact it's actually had. So that's why I'm putting her in the B tier. Our first entry into the A tier is Nightcrawling by Layla Motley. This book follows Kiara, a 17-year-old living in poverty in Oakland, and she has to turn to sex work in order to survive. She gets embroiled in a scandal that puts her in the middle of a case where she has to be a witness against the Oakland Police Department. So as you can imagine, this novel deals with a lot of tough themes: addiction, poverty, law enforcement, the justice system. But the exploration of all these themes felt very grounded. Motley did a really good job of painting this very immersive world with characters that felt really real and raw and vulnerable. Despite the very sad subject matter, there were really great moments of tenderness between the characters, these really beautiful moments of the characters seeking out joy and connection and being playful, even when they're struggling to survive. Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. She's also the author of Station 11, and something that I really enjoy in her work is how she weaves together different character perspectives across different timelines. This novel takes place in 3 different timelines, from 1912 to a colony on the moon 500 years in the future. There's a mystery at the core of this novel that interlinks all 3 timelines, and I'm not going to say any more because I think the less you know going into this novel, the better. It's not a very long book, but it leaves like such an impact and it still feels really vivid to me. It's the same as Station 11, and I just really, really enjoy her work. And I've only read two of her books, but I cannot wait to read more. Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I read this for the second time this year, and I don't often gravitate towards romance books. Like, I love a rom-com and like a Korean romantic drama for like film and TV, but even then I still don't really gravitate towards them that often. Emily Henry was the first kind of straight romance that I dipped my toe into as an adult like a few years back. I don't know why, I just didn't really reach for romance novels that much, but there's something about them that's just so comforting and fun and heartwarming, and I do love them from time to time. This book is about a cutthroat literary agent named Nora Stevens who goes on like a sister's trip to North Carolina, and while she's there, who else happens to be there but her like rival enemy editor Charlie, and they keep bumping into each other, and maybe their little rivalry blossoms into a romance. Who knows? I really like Emily Henry's style. I feel like the dialogue is genuinely funny. The romantic interests feel like they have actual chemistry, and I feel like any kind of obstacles that come up aren't like these forced tropey plot points where you know like, oh, the author is obviously just inserting an obstacle for the couple to overcome by the end of the novel. They feel like true to the characters and to the story, and they're just really well crafted romances. And I think I've read like 4 Emily Henry books, but I think Book Lovers is my favorite, and I'll probably read it for a third time at some point in the future. Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. This book follows Cyrus, an Iranian American poet and addict. Cyrus's mother tragically died when he was young. Her plane was shot down by a US missile by mistake during the Iran-Iraq war. When Cyrus gets sober, this sparks him on a journey to kind of find out what gives life meaning, what gives life purpose. Cyrus decides to write a project about martyrs, and we get a lot of different perspectives and time periods, and a lot of them are centered on the Iran war and its ramifications. There's also an Iranian performance artist who is dying of breast cancer and decides that her last project is going to be called Death Speaks, where she has conversations with people while she's dying. The novel weaves together all these themes of love, queerness, art, family, death, and martyrdom. This was written really beautifully. Kaveh Akbar is also a poet, and you can really see that in the prose, and I think it manages to tackle all of these really heavy themes without really leaving any stone unturned. I felt very satisfied from the novel. It was very thought-provoking as well. Even just talking about it makes me want to revisit. I got it from the library and I might just have to check it out again. I also reread Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller this year. This was such a popular book online. It really sparked the like Greek mythology retelling craze. It's a retelling of the myth of Achilles and the Trojan War, and focuses on the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus. Achilles and Patroclus are thought by some historians to have been lovers. Others say that they were close friends, but this novel explicitly examines their relationship as a love story. I read it for the first time years ago. I think it came out in 2016. It's just such a tender love story. It uses the Greek mythology setting and aesthetics and themes while still making it fresh. I also have Circe by Madeline Miller. I didn't read it this year, but I also love that book. I think Madeline Miller is just so talented. Carrie Soto is back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I've read 2 Taylor Jenkins Reid books, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six, but I think this was my favorite. It's about a formidable tennis player named Carrie Soto coming out of retirement for one last year of tournaments. Did I partially love it because it reminded me of Challengers? Yes. Carrie's relationship with her dad is a major theme in this book, and that really tugged on the heartstrings. I read this while I was on holiday, like lying in the sun by the pool on a lounger, and I devoured it. Taylor Jenkins Reid also interweaves these fictional media coverage, like newspaper excerpts, etc., into the main narrative to flesh out the world and also comment on how female athletes, especially women of color, are portrayed in the media. Taylor Jenkins Reid is white and Carrie Soto is Latina, so I think some have criticized her, or at least kind of discussed her writing a different race that is not her lived experience. Obviously, I'm also white. I'm literally as white as you can get. I can't comment on how accurate any of the racial commentary is. I didn't feel any alarm bells go off in my head or anything, but there definitely could be things that I completely missed and did not pick up on at all. So I'd be interested to hear from other people who have read this book as well and what you thought of the representation. Bunny by Mona Awad. I've read 3 of Mona Awad's books. I've read Rouge, All's Well, and Bunny, and I love her writing style so much. She writes this kind of like surrealist, magical horror. A lot of it is very much inspired by fairy tales. And this book is about a girl named Sam who is doing a creative writing master's, I think, in a New England liberal arts college. And her only classmates are this clique of hyper feminine girls who all call each other Bunny. And they may or may not be a coven as well. I read this book years ago. You can actually see like on the cover, there's like sun bleaching from it sitting on my windowsill in a book stack. I just love how the like fairy tale elements come into play in Mona Awad's books. And this novel is very much an exploration of loneliness and friendship and imagination, and how sometimes we use our imagination to maybe cope with loneliness and our problems. I always see this tagged as like dark academia as well, and I would agree. I read this in like August, I think, and I loved it. Moving on to our S tier books, are the concept of books. The first is a nonfiction called Pixel Flesh by Ellen Atlanta. I read this as research for my beauty standards video, and I was also lucky enough to chat with Ellen Atlanta for that video. She let me interview her, and we had a really interesting chat about beauty, the beauty industry, beauty standards, especially in the digital age. A lot of plastic surgery has kind of been framed in the lens of choice feminism, of how like it's anybody's right to do whatever they want with their face and their body, which sure, but beauty treatments, plastic surgery, etc. are also framed as like investments in yourself. But these investments aren't like traditional monetary investments, because you are spending money, but you might not be getting any money back from that. This is just such an excellent exploration of beauty and beauty culture. This book covers so many different aspects of beauty, and it's really broad and like wide-reaching, but it doesn't feel like it's tackling any themes kind of half-assed or shallowly. I just highly recommend it to everyone. I feel like I could read this like 5 times, and every time I would come away having learned something new. The first book I read this year is going in the S tier. It is a classic, not just for me, but for the literary canon as a whole, Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I read this in January, right after Christmas, sitting by a fire. It was dark and gloomy, and it was just perfect for rereading this book. I read this when I was a teenager. I think I read this in college as well and wrote an essay on it, and I was very excited to revisit it. And this truly is just a timeless classic, and it is not a romance. I'm actually like struggling to even articulate how much I love this book. It's so immersive and touching and horrifying as well at times, but I love it so much. And I'm probably going to reread it before the Emerald Fennel film comes out, because I want to have it fresh in my mind for critiquing that film, because I already know I'm going to have some bones to pick with it. Bronte manages to weave so many perspectives together to tell the story of love and family and abuse and hauntings. It's just so expertly crafted. Like, it really is just an expertly crafted book. Speaking of expertly crafted books, the next S tier are actually 3 books, but I'm just going to hold up one. And it is the first 3 books of the Neapolitan Quartet by Elena Ferrante. I've read those books before a couple years ago, and I went back to reread them. You can probably tell that I love to reread books. I read the first 3 kind of across the summer, and then I wanted to take a little break before I read the 4th one. And then my ADHD brain forgot that I was reading them, and so I still haven't reread the 4th book. 2 girls in Naples in Italy, growing up kind of right post World War II. They're growing up in poverty, and their lives take 2 very different tracks. One kind of stays stuck in her hometown in poverty, while the other goes off and gets an education. It talks about female friendship, it talks about love and family and political activism, and kind of compares on the ground political activism versus bourgeoisie intellectual political activism as well. If you're gonna read like any of the books from this video, please let it be the Neapolitan Quartet, because I've never read anything that captures the kind of complexities of female friendship, of intense love, but also the competition and the comparison that can happen, especially when you're like a teenager. They're the best books in the world. I love them so much. You get to know all of the characters so deeply. Like someone might be mentioned in the first book, or they might pop up in a couple pages, and then in the third book they could be a main character. Everybody feels so real, and this community just feels like it's living and breathing. And the first time I was reading these books, it was summer in Dublin. It was a couple years ago, and I had my windows open, and I literally like felt like I was in Italy. And I heard people walking by, and they were just talking English, obviously with Irish accents. And I was like, why are they not speaking Italian? And I was like, I'm not even in Italy. Like, that's how immersive these books are, and I love them with my whole heart. And I think part of me is not reading the fourth book because I don't want it to end again, so I'm kind of putting that off. I've got a couple more classics in my S tier, and the next up we have Dracula. This was also a reread. I love Dracula so much. You probably think you know Dracula because the story is so popular. It's literally the blueprint for every vampire story. I think you'd be surprised if you actually read Dracula. The main character in it, or one of the main characters, Jonathan Harker, is like a himbo, genuinely. Like towards the start of the novel, he's on his way to Count Dracula's castle, and all of the locals in Transylvania are like saying in their language like devil, demon, werewolf, vampire, and Jonathan's like, huh, that's weird. I'll have to ask Dracula about that. Dracula is written as a series of letters and diary entries and some like kind of newspaper articles, but they just weave together so well. Another Irish author, Mr. Bram Stoker. If you are interested in horror, if you like vampire stories, like I really urge you not to be kind of intimidated by the like language or time period or anything like that in Dracula, because once you get into it, it really just flows. It is such a good book. And honestly, I would say it's probably one of my favorites. I love it so much. The second last book in our S tier and the last classic is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I reread this after watching the new Guillermo del Toro film, because I read this during college, but I didn't really remember it too much. I think I just read it very quickly for a lecture or something. And like Dracula, this very much is the blueprint for so much horror, and it's fantastic. I truly, again, like you think you know the story of Frankenstein, but then you read the book and it feels so different, and so much has changed in kind of the cultural depictions and adaptations of it. It's spectacular. There's so many themes of birth and creation and the relationship between humans and nature and science. I read this and Dracula in October as well, so it was very Halloween-y, very, gothic, dark, brooding, stormy. It was just so good. I love Frankenstein. I love Dracula. I love the horror classics. What can I say? I love horror, and I'll read some new ones, but then I go back to the fundamentals at the end of the day. I don't know if it's just me, but sometimes I have a notion in my head that like classic literature might be kind of hard or like laborious to read. Like it might take more energy because it's different language somewhat, it's different time periods, different styles, etc., etc. But when I started reading Frankenstein, I really just tore through it. I think I read it in like 3 or 4 days, and I just did not want to put it down. Even though I knew the story, I was just really, really hooked, and it's a page turner. It's a classic for a reason. Last in our S tier, the last book that I finished in 2025 so far. We still have a couple weeks left, but it is Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe. This is a nonfiction book about the troubles in the north of Ireland. It tracks the brewing tensions between, Catholics and Protestants, Republicans and Loyalists, and, how they escalate into troubles, into basically a violent conflict that lasted decades in Irish history. Very recent history as well. And even though I know kind of the basics, the fundamentals of the troubles and the conflict, etc., just from growing up in Ireland, I feel like I didn't know enough about the specifics. This book manages to both kind of hone its focus on a few individuals, but also using the stories of a few people to chart the entire conflict, and it was just spectacular. It focuses primarily on 2 of the first female members of the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, and a couple of their high up IRA officials, basically. But this book was just so well researched, well structured, well written, and I do feel like I learned a lot from it. It was a page turner. Like, even though I knew what was happening and what was gonna happen, it had this momentum where I didn't want to put it down. It managed to be both entertaining or enthralling and educational at the same time, which can be a tricky line to tread sometimes. So those are all the books that I read in 2025. We had some highs, we had some lows. I hope you'll forgive me for being maybe a little bit lower energy. I've been sick for like 2 weeks. I think there's been this crazy flu going around where I was like intensely sick and then I got better, but now I'm back to being like just a ball of phlegm and mucus. If you're interested in my like media highlights of 2025, mainly film and TV, I'm going to be doing a little roundup over on the Patreon. The Patreon. Thank you all for being here with me in 2025. I truly appreciate everybody that is subscribed, everybody that watches my videos, everybody that comments. Like, I'm just so grateful for my job and for you guys all letting me do my dream job, basically. I'm looking forward to the rest of December. I'm looking forward to next year. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye. Thank you to my patrons for making this video possible. Special shout out Kelly T, Paula Boone, Icarus Moore, Angela Jovanovic, Eric Danielson, Cecilia Diarvel, and my Sharpay Evans tier patrons.